Where the hell are we?
We're in the I-75 corridor. Jellicoe.
Coming up on Jellicoe.
Ah, here we are. Back to Tennessee.
Welcome back to the Crushing Iron podcast. We are now heading across the border from Kentucky into Tennessee.
Yeah, we just made it through a thunderstorm and some technical difficulties. We appreciate you tuning in today. Listen, folks, it's July 26th, 2021. Welcome aboard. As we said, this is the Crushing Iron podcast, and we are episode 498 Roadshow number 4.
I'll take your word for it, man.
Roadshow number 4. We are headed back from a spectacular weekend at Ohio 70.3. We stayed at our usual Polaris exit in the just outside of Columbus, Ohio, and with the main race, obviously, there in the city of Delaware. We had an awesome weekend, and it was a really fantastic race as usual. So another big thanks to Ken Hammond, who, as always, Ken, if you're listening, and I think you are, you make us feel special.
Yeah.
We saw him right when we came in to check in on Friday, and as usual, he's just very approachable. And let me say this: he's an awesome guy. He's super genuine, but he's also always he seems genuinely intrigued by the feedback about how we think races are going. And I've got to say, like, race director is probably have like one of those. I think we said this last week. It's like one of the most thankless jobs, but. We'll get into that more in a little bit. But for those of you who it's your first time, welcome. We appreciate you tuning in.
Hang on.
What?
Well, I was just going to say, like, I'm not done with Ken. I want to throw out a shout-out.
I was going to go back to Ken.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, as I said, we're always going to go back to Ken. I was just trying to give our new listeners, a little bit of.
Do we have new listeners, you think?
That's your category. That's really not mine.
I don't.
I was just thinking about that a minute ago while you were like, obviously we're on the road right now. I'm driving the truck, and we're going through, we're on the I-75 right now, headed back towards Chattanooga, and you're getting SD cards out and plugging things in and trying to get things right. And I thought to myself, if you ever, come down with, like, an illness or something that you can't record, like, this podcast is screwed, because I literally have no idea what to do when it comes to this podcast besides talk in the microphone, have a conversation with you, when to show up, when to shut up, and that's pretty much it. Outside of that, you pretty much direct and produce every single bit of this podcast. I have a very, very small part.
I could see right now, open voice memos on iPhone and podcast.
You can do that?
Yeah, you can do it right from your iPhone.
I'd probably still fail on it, but anyway, go ahead. You can talk about Ken, and then we'll go into our soft
Ken,
open.
yeah, we talk about him as a race director. He is certainly the most welcoming race director we've encountered, I think. I mean, appreciative, that I feel like we had 30-some athletes up there, and I think he notices that, and I think that, personally, I think that's kind of cool. We brought 50-some in certain other places, and nobody gave a shit about it. But Ken, he's kind of like he's a welcoming guy, and he's always kind of looking out for us. And he found us actually, which was awesome. And he's also got a little bit of a kind of a sharp edge humor about him.
He does, and I like it.
He's got a little edge.
I know, that's why I like Ken so much.
Sarcasm, I like it.
And he swung by our tent after the race, and most of our athletes had finished, and he was like, I said, "Hey man, Grace." He was like, "Oh really?" He was like, "Thanks." He was like, because I'm glad you had that feedback, because right now I think it's going terrible. Which is like honestly, I get that, because all of the podcasts we've ever done that I thought were like the worst ones ever ended up being the ones we got like the most feedback from, and the ones I'm like, man, you know what? I think we nailed that podcast. Then we get like 3 negative reviews on iTunes, and the rest of them. But Ken, you did a great job. Obviously, you can't control the heat and the humidity. And you definitely obviously can't control people who just fail to be timely and show up to the race on time. I'll get into that here in a little bit. But outside of that, I thought as usual he did a great job. And even though there weren't pizza and Snickers, which I requested for the last 4 years after the race, I will say, and I will admit, I ate a cheeseburger, 2 bags of chips, and 2 Cokes at the end of the race, and I thought they were fine.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you're afraid of heights. Well, actually, I do. But
you do.
I would suggest not looking to your right. We are way up there.
Yeah, I've tried to say. Listen, I'm not afraid of heights. I have a definite fear of flying, which I've talked about before on this podcast. I have a huge fear of flying. that's more of a control thing. You won't find me probably at the ledge, 6 inches off the Grand Canyon looking over. Like I'll probably choose to say 6 feet, because listen, like what's the difference of view is negligible.
Yeah, they've trained you to stay 6 feet.
But I've been bungee jumping and I don't mind, cliff dive. Listen, I'd rather cliff dive like 200 meters into the water than I would get on a plane. But yeah, I do out of my periphery see that we are quite high.
I'm not gonna lie, my hand's sweating right now.
Yeah, no, I know you seem kind of. We talked about bridges over the weekend too, and I was like, I'm more of a hyper vigilant guy. I like to prepare for not very good case scenarios. So I will say, like if I go over really, really, really high bridges, I do kind of keep my trigger finger on the windows in case things go poorly and the bridge collapses, and I can get my windows down in time so the water comes in and I can have time to swim out. Got my trigger finger out. But that's it. So you and I both raced this last weekend. We had a lot of athletes race. Like we said, we had I think 22 or 23 that were competing individually. Then we had a lot of them in the relays. You were doing the run portion of the relay. I ended up doing the 70.3 that I hadn't really mentioned or talked about outside of a few people. Kind of want to race a little bit quietly and kind of under the radar. But I'll let you go first. How did you think the weekend went overall, and just your overall opinion of the Ohio 70.3 race day and race course itself?
It was good. It was good.
Are you nervous right now? You seem like you got your hand like gripping the side of the door. Like we're not going anywhere.
I'm fine. No, it was as usual. I like going up to Ohio. It was a good time, and we got that set up where it's like it's about as simple as I think you can make it. At least it feels like it. We just jump on the highway or like shoot up the road, and we're right at the lake and everything like that. I got to do a little working out at the lake on Friday, I guess it was, and then back out there Saturday. And I don't know what else to say. It was a good experience. I ended up jumping in the relay, which was actually perfect for me because with Chattanooga Full coming up, I felt like my bike got a shot in the arm a couple weeks ago up at Wisconsin on the course, and now I have, for the first time since Wisconsin, actually been in a race atmosphere.
Right, it's been a while.
I was talking to you earlier about that. You can't replicate it.
No.
And I remembered in kind of the hard way how difficult this stuff is, and I just ran a half marathon, which I'm not trying to downplay as nothing or anything like that, but I didn't do the bike or the swim, so I came out quote unquote fresh, which sometimes for me isn't as easy as kind of warming up. I like to get going, and sometimes I get lathered up on the bike good, and I actually feel better coming out on the run. It didn't feel great actually starting. I tried to warm up, but you know how that goes. And, I tried to do my thing. I wanted to go pretty hard, but I didn't want to kill myself, and I wanted to go out slow, and I wanted to pace it, and I wanted to try to lock in something and see how that went. But there was probably, I don't know, half a dozen times or more when I really had to dig deep to keep it going. And, I think that's what we forget a lot is how hard these races are. And, we kind of get up there and, the M&M's playing in the morning. Everybody's fired up and everything, and it feels good, and it's great to be around a lot of people and everything like that. But, 2-3-4 hours later, you're really kind of in a hurt locker. And that's what racing's all about. And how do you get prepared for that is the thing. So I was really glad I got to go through it and feel how brutal. We talked about dew point and humidity and how that really, really comes into effect. And, you sent me that chart. We'll get into that a little bit later. But, man, it was a tough run, but I felt pretty good about it. I was able to hold on, which is sort of like what you have to do in this sport.
Yeah, for all long distance racing, it goes for all endurance events where there's just running, cycling, swimming, triathlon, whatever it is. It's not how fast you go; it's how little you slow down, and that is just like getting to a point to where you can just suffer and be uncomfortable and just kind of sit there as long as you can. But no, it ended up being, really, really very nasty conditions on race day. I remember, and listen, this all goes back to can we just say stop believing everything you read on Facebook? Because all the chatter leading up to the race was that the current water temp was 70. Okay, so I go to the lake on Friday morning, and I remember I texted you because you hadn't gotten out there yet. I went and I got out there, got my little swim. I brought my wetsuit. I met Stuart and Meg Rogers out there, and I brought my wetsuit because I'm not on the Facebook group. I generally stay out of those because I think they're just like hysteria and chaos, on overdrive on steroids. But all you heard was like, "Oh, what? That's 70." I'm like, "Really? 70? That seems pretty cold. Like that seems pretty chill for this time of year." But I brought my wetsuit anyway, and I remember putting my toes in the water, and I thought, "Yeah." And listen, like that's how your brain plays tricks on you. Like when you read something or you hear something, you're already biased towards it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, "Yeah, it might be close to 70." And I swam about 800 with my wetsuit on. I took it off, and I was just like, I'm not wearing this. And I put on my swim skim. I did about 300, and I felt I felt unbelievably better. And I made the decision right then before seeing what the water temp was. I was like, no matter what happens today, I'm wearing my swim skin. And then about, 4 hours later, it was posted from the Ohio 70.3 actual, Facebook page. Current water temp, 80.4. And I was like, you know what? That seems a little more legit because, like anytime I hop in like the YMCA pool, that's no doubt close to 80 degrees, because they have to keep the older population happy with a warm water temp in the aqua classes. I was thinking, I'm usually get a little bit of a cold spell when I hop in for the first time, or a little bit of a cold shock. And I didn't have that today. So going back, I was like, yeah, that's probably right. So it was 80. So right then I knew that the chances for it being wetsuit legal were still there, which to me, obviously, like that makes me happy. I'm a swimmer. To be honest, I absolutely despise wearing my wetsuit. I hate it. I feel like I lose all feel for the water. I know it's helpful. I know you're quote-unquote faster in it. I hate the way it feels. I love being in a swim skin. It makes me feel like a swimmer. Happy swimmer. And if you feels fast, you usually are fast. So I made that decision. The temps there, listen, Friday and Saturday were unseasonably cool. Like it was about perfect. I know it got hot later in the day, but it was looking like, hey, this might be like a really, really awesome race day. They were calling for a chance of storm Sunday morning, which I think had people kind of nervous about, because after the whole Des Moines issue where Des Moines 70.3, they had storms on. They had postponed that race by like 2.5, 3 hours. And so I'm thinking in my back of my mind that I mentioned to some of the athletes, like, listen, if there's storms that morning, make sure you bring extra food. Because if you're delayed 2.5 hours, that puts your whole nutrition, your whole, pre-race routine kind of off its normal, routine. And so I was thinking about that, and then generally, got checked in. I didn't tell anybody I was racing, kind of kept it close to the vest. I hadn't raced in 3 years and finished. And it was actually Ohio was the last race I did. But I will say, I thought the check-in procedure was about as easy it could possibly get. I thought it's a 2 transition area, which I know it's not your right up on your alley of like things to check off your list.
No.
I actually kind of like it because I think it minimizes the amount of stuff you got to bring on race morning. Yes, you got to make an extra trip on the day before the race, but other than that, listen, it was easy. It was simple. I think it took me, all of 3 minutes to park, go walk my bike up to my racket, and leave. Same thing for my bike for the run bag on the football field. You walk up, you set it down, you're done. So I thought everything leading up to pre-race was fine. The one thing I had to say is you can drive into the park as a spectator. For you were nervous because you were part of a relay, and it takes a good long time to get out of that park after the race is over because there's so many cars. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm gonna call it right now. I wouldn't be shocked if next year at Ohio 70.3 shuttles are required.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to eliminate, because we'll get in the race here in a minute and just the ins and outs of it and lessons learned. But I think the race was delayed by 25 minutes. You think?
21 minutes.
21 minutes. There was a race delayed, not because of weather, not because of clearing out bike courses or stuff like that. It's because you people can't be on time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Partially, somebody parked or got a flat tire in the bike out lane, I think.
Yeah, and they had to be moved. Yeah.
But
listen, just be on time, people, because just be on time. Just be on time.
I mean,
get there early.
Their defense, 6:30 is pretty early.
I mean,
bro.
Just get there on time. Like, you know what time it is. Just be there on time.
I got a quick story about that, actually. I was down by where I was by the swim entrance, right by the lake. I was standing right by the clock. And they had got behind, and then they had the national anthem, and
put on Eminem.
And everybody was fired up, and they were hyped.
Yes, they were hyped.
They were hyped for the Clash. But they were counting the clock. I could see the guy was like, "We're going to start at 6:50," and he goes, "Can you see the clock?" Because there's a lot of people around. He goes, "I'm good." And he's standing over there with the horn, and they had a cannon on the ground, and I'm like,
I don't remember the cannon.
Of course, this is why. I'll tell you why. Because it was counting down, and I'm looking, and I'm like, all right, it's going off. So I plugged one ear that was closest to that, and I'm waiting. I look over, and the cannon didn't go off, and then he had that horn thing, and it was almost like one of those cartoons when they shoot a gun and like a flag comes out of it. He was shooting the horn, and the horn didn't go off either.
Oh, jeez.
And then that was at 6:50, and then the guy was like, okay, all right, just start moving up. He started moving people up. So I think maybe you guys crossed the timing, Matt, and then didn't get in the water right away because it was under the arch. I don't know if that's where the mat was. There was something right before the water, but I'll
happily take a minute off my swim. That actually brings up a good point because Paul.
It's funny, the guy's over there with that thing going, I don't know.
Yeah, Paul Adder, who I was standing with, we're walking up, and he said to me, "Where's the timing mat? Where does it start?" And I was like, "That's a good question," because they're rolling you in. It was a rolling start like they all are right now, and have been. And so the first group is like I think 25 to 27, then it was 27 to 30, and I remember thinking, that's a good question. I don't know. And so it had to have been further up the chute than when we started and got in the water. And I'll happily take a minute off my overall time.
Like I said, why would they have a carpet before the water, though?
Yeah, I guess that's a little confusing.
I feel like that they might have had a mat underneath there or something going on.
Yeah, they had to have something. I don't think it was in the water.
I just, how you normally go over and you hear.
Yeah, you hear the go off.
That never happened out on the
ground.
course either, so I don't know if.
Yeah,
like on the run course, it wasn't beeping.
Yeah, it sounds to me like about a 5 minute. I'll take 5 minutes.
Yeah,
off
you can. I think you can. Anybody can safely take 30 seconds off their time.
30? Okay, sweet. I was going for 5 minutes, but 30 sounds fine. I'll tell you what. The swim was again not wetsuit legal. It was warm. I think everyone that raced knew that morning that after the storms rolled in early, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I had, honestly, I told you this, I never really sleep that great the night before a race. I had, without question, the worst night of sleep I've ever had before a race. Maybe one of the worst nights of sleep I've ever had, like in my life.
Come on.
No, I'm not being prisoner moment. I'm saying like it was.
You can't blame that on Staybridge, though, can you?
No. I'm actually going to blame it on the pretzels. I think it just kind of keeps me up, with a little indigestion. But I remember, getting in the water.
Of your life.
Ooh. And pretzels are the pre-race pretzels are life, and they're required. But I knew going to the day. Listen, I was trying to relax. I saw the guys were kind of making fun of me because I was pretty quiet race morning. I went down the water. I got warmed up. I just kind of wanted to be by myself. I will say another feather in the cap for Ohio is that there's a pre-race warm up in the water. Like you can get, which is probably like one of like 2 or 3 in North America where you can actually get in the water and warm up before the race starts. Like that, to me, that's a huge win. It wasn't obviously wetsuit legal, which is what every race director wants because it makes everyone a little bit safer, a little more calmer. But I liked it. Listen, it had been a long time since I had raced and felt confident. I had changed things up as I talked about, in previous podcasts where I'm not doing near the volume that I was before, but it was the volume that fits in my life for where I am right now. And I was happy going to the race. I dialed in things, but I felt pretty strong in the swim and the bike. But I think after looking at the storms and how things rolled in, I took the approach of take the swim easy, like Ironman pace, and see what I had. I will say that the 2 times I've done Ohio 70.3, the swim out, and listen, I think everybody does this. When you look at the swim course the morning of, you think, God, that looks a long way. Like when I look down the road at a run, I'm like, it looks about a mile. That's not bad. But when I look at the shape of a swim course, I'm like, that's got to be at least 2 miles. That's not 1.2. That's got to be, and especially the shape of it. It was like an upside down triangle. The way out always seems to take forever. And I made the way out. I feel like my game plan was just to sight really, really well, to swim fairly easy, to be relaxed, to not get in a hurry, to take full strokes. I feel like I did that on the way out. I know on the way across to the other end before you made your way back, I do remember feeling like it got a little bit choppy, but my only guess, and which was confirmed, that it was a rescue boat that had gone out, because it got kind of wavy there for a second. But made my way across, and then I will say, like, the 2 times I've done this race, even though I like do the practice swim, I always underestimate the angle coming back in and how acute it is, like how angled it is going back towards the finish. And that's, I think, why it's a slower course. It's not wetsuit legal, and it's just a slow body of water. It just really is. And I think the course direction, I think it's a little bit long too. It's just a long swim. But I thought I swam well. I was happy with it. I saw you out of the water, and you nailed it. You even gave me over. I joke with Mike still, and I'm sure a lot of you heard it, like, about Texas 70.3 when I got out like 3 years ago, and he was like, "You nailed it, man." I think you said like 28 or something like that, or you had like 4 minutes faster than what I really was. and this time you went over, because I didn't wear a watch. I left my watch in my run bag the day before, because I wasn't sure if I was going to wear it anyway, and so I didn't know what my time was getting out of the water. And I looked at it and said, "What was it?" And you were like 32. I was like, "I'll take 32." That's generally what I thought where I was going to be for the day. But I knew, I think, even that race morning and looking at the temperature and the predicted humidity, that it was going to be nasty and it was going to be really, really muggy. And I noticed that the first, 5 miles on the bike was that I was sweating profusely already. The humidity had to have been, my guess was in the 90s. And then I think I had to wipe my visor off twice in the first 10 miles because it was like fogging up so bad. And we'll get into that in a minute, but I think going back to being prepared and looking at how you race. If you raced yesterday at Ohio, I know there was a lot of races. Like we had Lake Placid, Oregon. You had a lot of races going on. I know it was a tough day. I thought overall. I thought the bike course is still fairly fast just because of how the terrain is. But I know when I finished the run, the humidity was in the 90s and the dew point was 75, which is like anything over 72. Basically, anything you read will say don't really exercise outside if you can. Anything over that, you should take it's gonna take a minute, maybe even more off your minute mile pace. It just ended up being I think an underestimated, really, really tough day. Even though the day started overcast, you might think, oh, well, that's a blessing in disguise. But I would take sunny with low humidity and low dew point over overcast with a high humidity and high dew point any day of the week.
Yeah, and because of the overcast, I didn't really think much. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but as I said, I was just getting out there to run, and I was like, okay, well, it's overcast. I got lucky, I'm going to go out and do it. And then about halfway through, I started feeling like this is really difficult, and I was getting pretty hot too, but I guess you underestimate it, and especially when you're racing. And I think that what you mentioned is, it was a fast bike course, and I think a lot of times, man, it's the Muncie thing or this Ohio thing that's sort of like continual grind, man, with no variance or anything, or no chance to really coast and sort of get your bearings or mix up the speed of your cadence, and you just sort of have to lock in from the get-go. That can often be harder, especially when you get off and now you got to run and deal with, what I felt like was a sneaky run course. There was a lot of nothing huge or nothing really super tough, but it just sort of kind of kept, like you always say, body punching you. It was just body blows, a lot of ups and downs, and it just never really. And it was very, it got sunny there towards the end, at least for me, and it just never. There was like that one long downhill that's kind of like gives you a little reprieve, but other than that, I felt like even the flats had a little bit of an incline to them, sort of like 0.5 on the treadmill all the day, and it wasn't like an overall huge gain. I think I got 370 or something like that. I don't know if anybody else said anything about that, but as far as the elevation on the run, so it wasn't bad, but it just sort of kept nicking at you.
It does. The run course does nick at you. And again, like the bike course, like some people like flat, fast, and aero. Some people like course, elevation changes where you can, get up out of the saddle. You can sit up. You can take, little breathers here and there. There's a lot of cornering. A lot of people like that because they can corner fast and it gives them a chance to kind of like shake things out, get their drinks done.
That's totally me.
Yeah, I know that's right in your wheelhouse. It's mine too. I like those kind of courses. And for this one, it's like the first 35-ish miles. There's barely any turns. It's just straight away. Listen, the roads are fine. They're not, are they perfect? No. Are they the worst? No. I will say, and to me, this is what I think a lot of athletes, how they should, if they're really thinking about it, should rank how well they like the bike course. I think I saw 4 cars the entire time.
Oh, really?
I mean, honestly, I think it's one of the. It's not a totally closed off course like like a Muncie 70.3. But it's probably one of the, if not one of the, it's one of the safest courses I've ever been on. Muncie is the safest because there's literally no traffic. But this is a close one, and I always felt like I had room, and I never feel like there was too much traffic, and I never felt like I had to be worried about cars and big trucks. Like, so if that's something that you look at this race because I thought it was very well done. Even on the main kind of highway, we had our own lane. We had a shoulder that they told you to stay off of besides the rumble strips, but outside of that, we had an entire lane to our, so which is plenty of room. Then once you got on the back roads, it was like, there was no one out there, and so I thought that was great. Listen, anytime there's rougher road, I don't know about you, but I know you didn't do the bike course, but it always feels like they save the rougher road for the end, which most athletes are already fatigued on. This course is kind of sneaky in a way that, and we mentioned this before, is that your miles per hour will always be highest like the first 30, and then just because of the nature of the course, the hills, the rollers that they do have on the back end, which I kind of like because after 40-something miles an aero, it's nice to be able to the last little bit to sit up with good reason, not just because you're in aero to give your lower back a stretch, but it's a lot of turns at the end. So it is kind of disheartening if you've never done the course, you don't know what to expect, just to kind of watch your average miles per hour go down and go down and go down and go down. But it is what it is. That's just the nature of the course. You could do it in reverse, and you could get, see your miles per hour go up. I think when I started hitting the turns, my miles per hour was like 23.8. When I started hitting the turns, I think it ended up being like 23.4, so it dropped 0.4. But I had done the course before, so I knew to expect that with all the turns and the rougher road. And I was joking with Ken after the race. Once we turned onto the back roads, the first turn we hit, perfect pavement. Probably the most picturesque, perfect asphalt I've ever ridden on in my entire life. And I remember hitting it thinking, oh my, this is going to be the most spectacular last 15 miles of any race I've ever done. They just paved it all. And about 50 feet after that, you had a sign. Careful, rough road ahead. I'm thinking, oh my God, motherfucker, you got to be kidding me right now.
Sign.
So what happened? Apparently, what happened was, because I mentioned it to Ken, kind of like joking with him, because obviously he has no control over what Ohio DOT does with like the roads. He goes, well, they're actually ahead of schedule. So on Friday, so if you raced and you saw that perfectly paved road, that was paved on, I think, late Friday or Saturday morning, the day before the race. Because on Friday, he said, they had already chipped and gutted it, and it was just plain gravel. Because they got like I guess a day or two ahead of their regular schedule, which who has ever heard of any kind of Department of Transportation being ahead of schedule? But they were ahead of schedule, and that's why it was perfectly paved, because he was like, we have to fix this. All these things, like, again, when you think about a race director's job, it is a thankless job. Like, all you do is hear about you get the negative feedback and this and that and this and that and this and that and what didn't go right, but like you don't see the behind the scenes like worry and anxiety about things that you might think one or two things didn't go right, but what you probably don't know or don't see and will never hear about are the 200 things that could have gone wrong that didn't go wrong because the race director and the event management staff made sure you never knew about it. Mm-hmm. And so if you rode that section of asphalt and you were kind of grumpy the rest wasn't, well, just be glad it wasn't straight gravel. And kind of think about how nervous you would have been the day before. But the last little bits, it's tricky. Again, I liked it, but I could tell, and I mentioned this to you, I think, this morning, is that I think I was a bottle down. We'll talk about how tough the run was in a minute, but I think I was a bottle down. I think with the humidity, and I knew the dew point was high. I didn't know it was that high, but I think I needed just some more plain water in me, and I think I made a mistake there, not taking in more hydration. I think I was a one full bottle down than what I should have. I felt fine. I think that because I remember looking down and looking at my bento box thinking, good God, you're sweating profusely right now. Like just losing ounces and ounces and ounces of water. I think I was getting in the right calories. I took in all my goos. I took in all my EFS. I just think I probably needed one more just straight bottled water from an aid station, especially like at mile 40, 45-ish, which I think is the last one. And honestly, like, those people might joke about this, but like on my Wahoo Element, on my bike computer, if I can pull it up, which, given all the gadgets you have now, I'm thinking about now just putting in like temperature, like putting up like humidity and dew point as a field on my bike computer and my Garmin, because I generally think if I had seen what it was gonna be like on the run, because listen, you can tell when you're biking that it's a little bit harder and the humidity's higher. You can more so tell in the heat, especially when there's hills, because you're stopping, you're not getting as much wind. But when you're on a faster course, you're always going, for anybody, anywhere between, 15, 16, 26 miles an hour, you've always got the wind. So it always feels a little bit cooler than it really is, which doesn't make it less humid. It doesn't make the dew point less. It just makes you feel like it's not as hot. And, so I think knowing what I knew once I started running and once I got done, I think that's where I made a huge mistake, as we'll talk about the run here in a minute. I got into kind of a bad spot around mile 6-ish when I think that caught up with me. But, again, I thought the bike course, generally speaking, was fine. I thought it was a overall fast course. It didn't rain, which was great. Like it's raining right now. You can probably hear it in the windshield. Pop-up shower here in the northwestern part of the state of Tennessee. Came in. Apparently, I missed you on the football field. Came off, racked my bike. You said you were doing jumping jacks and burpees on the football field, getting ready for your run.
I saw you come in, but like I said, I was like, man, you had a solid bike going there, and I looked. So I it's always that dilemma with the rolling start, and I get so confused about tracking people and who's in first and what's on second and all that. And I looked you up, and you'd average 23.4 or whatever, and I was like, solid bike, and I'm like, look that up, and then I think it was like
didn't even put a dent.
16 off at least in the current tracking thing that I had. But then I didn't want to check and like compare it, so I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to say anything.
Keep my mouth shut.
I'm not going to say anything. So I was over there. Yeah, I was doing jumping jack. There was we were all standing over by the fence where the relay pen was, and there's maybe 50 relay teams up there, which is a lot actually. And
there were 50 relay teams.
Yeah, and we got 6th, by the way, which was
nice job.
Thank you. So there's a younger couple, it looked like, and they were waiting to run. I don't know. They must have been on 2 different ones. And so my thing was all about timing, right? Like get there in time and make sure I'm there for our cyclist to come in, Susan. And I'm trying to track her, but there's only one time mat,
yeah. There's only one.
At mile 44. And I don't understand that, but like
hashtag not helpful.
No, it makes it kind of a nightmare. So I had no idea, but like I'm going, man. I talked to them. I said, hey, I wish there was more timing mats, and out there, and they're like, oh, you can track, and you can download the tracker.
Oh God.
I said, what? Oh yeah, you can. And she's like, yeah.
Is that when you threw in? You don't know who I am, do you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't throw in one of those. You didn't throw in like you don't know.
So then
Mike Tarrolly.
So I said, oh, you can. Okay, nice. She goes, yeah, you can pull up the map, and this map shows you exactly where they are. And I go, I don't know if that's going to be accurate. And she goes, oh, yeah, it's really accurate. And I said, okay, fine.
As accurate as the 420s I did coming out of transition, apparently, on the run course.
So and then I go, hey, do you guys know where I can get some water right now? And she goes, well, no, I don't know where you can get some right now. I go, okay. And I said, well, she goes, don't worry, though. They're going to have water on the course. She said that to me, and I go, all right, cool. So anyway, I went and got some water.
And you still refrained from saying,
yeah, I refrained.
Do you know who I am, do you?
But then I slowly disrobed and revealed the C26 garb. I put on my headband, and I started doing all kinds of crazy warm-up exercises right next to them, and they're like, look at this weirdo. Kind of like, I don't know, like a comedy skit of like you would do in front of a workout routine.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they're looking at me like, what is this guy all about? But my thing was I wanted some water. I got 2 big water bottles, and I filled them full of ice and water, and I was waiting, so it was hot on that football field, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started dousing myself for until she got in, and I think it helped. I was trying to keep my core temp down and just keep cool while I was waiting, because I ended up waiting for about what turned out to be an hour. I got out there a little earlier than I probably should have. But I didn't know what else to do, man.
Yeah, you didn't have a tracker. You just sitting up. It's always better to be early.
Yeah,
than
I just
late.
didn't want to get surprised because I had that note. I didn't know the tracker, man. I knew she was going to throw the hammer down.
She did throw the hammer down. She threw a big
230 bike.
A big hammer down. No, the field was hot. I love the transition there right there. The T2 is on the football field. It's easy to find your bike. I came in. I racked my bike. I felt good. My legs felt good. I could tell my body was a little bit hot. But I felt good. And this is the first race that I've ever gone. Usually if I'm going to wear my watch on the run, I'm going to choose to wear it. I always just start with it just because it seems like it's easier. But, I've seen a lot of people, I know people who just grab their watch in T2 and put it on. And that's what I did. I left it in my shoes. I did wear socks for this race. I'm usually a no sock guy in races, but I don't have enough mileage in my Endorphin Pros to know if they're going to blister or not blister. And with as hot and humid as it was going to be, I knew that I was going to eventually be just covered in water. So I took the time to put on my Swift Wicks, put on my Sauconys, grab my visor, my gel, my bib, and my watch, put it around my wrist, turned it on, waited for it to catch on the my GPS, and hit start, which honestly ended up playing mind games with me because I forgot that I did that. So I probably ran, because the first little out portion of the run, you go through the tunnel, so I'm not picking up any GPS there. So I probably didn't pick up GPS till 0.2, 0.3 down the road. And so the whole time on the course, I'm not hitting my miles. My lap isn't going off until a good, 0.2, again, 0.2, 0.3 past each mile marker. So I hit mile 1 and my watch hadn't gone off yet. Hit mile 7, watch hadn't gone off yet for that one. And I think to myself, oh, this run course might be short. And I'm thinking, hey, that wouldn't be so bad today with this being as muggy. And then I don't think I realized it till mile 12, and I was like, oh, that's why. It's still the length. My clock didn't start. Because the reason I wanted to wear it, because I honestly knew it was going to be hot. I knew it was humid. I knew it was muggy. I didn't want to overcook it. So that was the reason for wearing it. I've gone a lot of times without wearing a watch, but the worse the conditions are, the more apt I am to wear it, just to kind of keep myself in check. So I put it on, came out of the gate. I did come out a little bit toasty. I think I was doing 650s for the first 0.3, and then I slowed it down big time. Grabbed a little bit of water at the first aid station. That was about, I think lukewarm is being generous. It was like a steaming hot bath, the water there was.
Yeah, sometimes you did.
Yeah, I walked out, and so I grabbed that, kept running, slowed it down, kept slowing it down until I got to around 7:10, which felt manageable. Again, they aren't doing it where, they're not handing you cups like they used to. You have to grab it at self-serve. So it's slower. You have to take that time to grab it yourself. And as you guys know, you're running by a table trying to keep momentum and also grabbing a paper-thin cup of what you want at whatever table it is. And it's hard. And so your first thought is, which was mine, the first aid station was, I'm going to slowly run and grab what I can grab. And so that's what I did. And then my second mile, we had the little hill, that little pincher going up, and then it being 740s. Once I got to the end of the second mile and we got to the aid station, I was going towards the end, and I went to grab 2 cups, and I missed them. And my initial gut reaction is always, you just keep going. You got to save time. You got to save time, baby. Was to keep going. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And I turned around and walked 3 steps back, grabbed them, and I looked at the volunteer and said, today's not the day to miss your water. And so I downed 2 water, and I doused myself, and that's when I made the decision. I was I was already feeling the heat. Again, later to find out the humidity was incredibly high, dew points high. That's why the feels I could tell myself I was heating up quickly. I felt fine. But even walking the aid stage for the next 3 miles, not the entire aid station, but I choose like the very end. I'd grab my Coke, I'd drink it, and then I'd grab water and ice and just kind of get cool. Even doing that for the first 5 miles, I was still averaging under 720s, which is kind of where I had hoped I would be for the day, given what I thought the conditions might be. And then around mile what is that, like mile 5.5, 6, when you start to grind up that longer kind of hill before you take the right going into your second loop, that's when I hit a bad spot. That's when I kind of got those chills on my arms. Don't feel like I was sweating a lot. And that's when I was like, you need to hit the water. You need the water now. Like I hit a bad spot. It was kind of one of those where you feel like your face and your body is just so incredibly hot. I threw my visor down, I think at mile 5 or 6 at the aid station, because I was like, this is just making me feel hot. It was still overcast at that point. And then, as usual, about a half mile later, here comes the sun. I'm like, God, mother, like I wish I had that visor. And I just got so hot that I had to kind of play triage for a little bit to kind of keep that, which I think that was the name of the game for most people, was like, let me just see how cool I can stay to make it through this run to where I might slowly implode, to where my run pace is going to just, drop a little bit here and there. But what I don't want to do is just have it implode so much to where that implosion leads to where I'm having to walk the last, 3 miles.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up, because I was having the same thing with the water. Like I had 2 flasks of Scratch, 2 scoops in each flask. And that was basically all I used for the whole run. I did have a Coke once and maybe a Gatorade or something, but for the most part I was just using those, and then I just was craving water. I was dousing water and I was sipping water. And I got to be honest, now that I think about it, like with that dew point and everything like that, as far as my fitness goes, I think that was about as good of a race as I could have ran, actually, because my first mile was my slowest, because I've been preaching this ease into stuff. And you made a good point, because I went 9:30 my first mile, and then that second mile I went down to about 9, but it included that hill. So I may have, maybe just pushed it a little bit too hard right there. But I did feel good, basically until you said mile 7. It was about when that second loop started. And it's just crazy, man, how you can feel like you're just cruising along at the same deal. But that first loop, a lot of it, I was in the 8:30 range, and I had 1 mile at 8:20 or something, and it felt good. And I just kind of kept going. I'm like, all right, lock right here, just lock it right here. And I did, and it felt like exactly the same cadence and turnover or whatever. But I was slowing down. I was 9-minute pace, and it was really getting hard to hold that 9-minute pace. But I think that's what happens, right? Is like you talk about, just don't slow down. And it was all I had to hold 9 minutes for the rest of the race. So, and I think I did a good job of that. Yeah, I was real happy with that. And
I wasn't even close to this guy's rear end, dude. Come on. don't do it.
Well, you know how
like
it
that,
is,
dude.
man. When you're in the passenger seat, it's always
yeah, I
seems
know.
like
it always seems
it's
like it.
Well, I can't do anything right now. But anyway, what else was I had one more thing about that run, I think. Nope, maybe that's it.
Yeah, I know, listening to you talk through that, I know where I made a huge mistake. Given that it was, because I've talked about this on a couple of podcasts and a couple of our weekly athlete Zooms, is that, I've been recommending, bringing a handheld on the course, with you for some of these races, because you are going to have to stop on your own to grab water and to grab fuel. Mm-hmm. I brought my handheld, I brought my bottle to do it, and then I remember thinking, do I really want to, put my nutrition in a bottle, have it sit overnight, and basically be 90 degrees when I grab it? No, I don't. Hindsight, what I should have done is
filled it.
No.
That day.
Put my bottle. No, not that morning.
At the aid station.
Exactly. Was to just put my bottle in handheld empty, probably make it through the first mile without stopping. And then at, maybe aid station number 2, just, opening the bottle, taking the top off the bottle before I got to the aid station. As soon as you get to the ice and water station, basically just stop, take 3 cups of the ice they had out, put it in the put it in the bottle, and then put like 2 cups of water in there and done that. You probably would have only had to stop for water probably one more time. I could have used that probably through the next 5 or 6 miles to either get in more water or to just spray myself, to keep myself cool. I think that would have saved me at least a minute, if not more, and probably kept me cooler and more hydrated, because some of those, at least it seemed like it, some of those aid stations were not mile to mile. There were some that were stretched out a little bit longer than a mile. I think there was some a little bit more of a stretched, which is what which I didn't really anticipate that. So looking back on that, that's I think where I definitely made a mistake, and I could have made things a little bit better, a little bit easier on myself. So in retrospect, that's a decision I'll probably change next time. But live and learn. But it got hot. It got to the point to where you and I discussed this again on the drive before we even went live here, was that like even once I kind of feel like I got my wits about me, I got more water in me, I got fueled up more, I generally felt better. I think I struggled the most things like miles 6 and 8. But then it got to be like, miles 8 to 10, I felt like I was going faster. Like I felt good. I felt like I was kind of in the moment. I wasn't on the defensive as much. I felt like I felt at least like I was running harder, only to see when my split came up that no, you were in fact not. You were not in fact going as fast as you think. But the effort was there, and that's something that I was like, there's a lot I could, go into detail about and kind of rehash my entire race from a number standpoint and what I was happy with and what I was kind of not as happy with. But I was 100% happy with my effort because I emptied it. I was smoked when I got done. My last 2 miles were definitely the hardest. I remember telling you again earlier that I was like, I wanted to wait till mile 8 before I just like really pulled the trigger. If I had a trigger to pull. And so I'm glad I didn't, because it would have made it for a nastier one. But I finally got it about me. And then, you make that final turn and you think, all right, all I got to do is do this for a mile. I think I can make it. But I honestly don't know that I had much more than another quarter of a mile in me, because I went down that final stretch. There had been a guy that had been running with me for a mile, and I pulled ahead of him. And I could tell from people like yelling, hey, it's going to be a, catch him, or it's going to be a photo finish. I'm here, I'm thinking like, dude, it's a time trial start. It's totally meaningless, because the truth is like neither one of us started at the same time. So I ended up pulling away from him, as I remember looking back and thinking, and then I know you're on a relay, but I hit the track. I'm pulling the tight turn, making the last turn down the home stretch to the finish line. And here comes this like 16-year-old Prefontaine with a loose tank top and track shorts, hair blown in the wind, and he effing blew by me like I was standing still.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's the guy that cost me the podium.
I was like, bro, what are you, seriously, man? Like, just let me have a moment here. I mean, he just dusted me.
I knew I was in trouble when I saw him leave.
I mean, he was going. He was flying. I mean, he seriously, I felt like I was standing still. But that was I felt demolished when I got done. Again, not so much from a muscular standpoint. I mean, I didn't feel great, but the heat and the humidity I felt like I was a furnace. I ended up picking up my visor back up on the way back in. Listen, the C26 visors are currently sold out.
I was going to say,
I picked it back up. No, I didn't leave it.
I stopped and grabbed it. Got it in the next loop?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was my plan. I didn't like do it in the aid station. I did it right before where there was like a tent. And I was like, let me toss it. And then I looked up the road and I was like, I don't see it. And they actually just pulled it and like, had it sitting at the side. So I actually ended up and grabbed it and put it on. Because like I said, they're a hot commodity. But it is like it was one of the most. Honestly, it reminded me of how I used to feel on the back half of the old Ironman Louisville course. That's how hot I generally felt that day. I think it was still only like it feels like in the 90s, but it honestly, it was the dew point and the humidity that just sucked the life out of me. It took me out back behind the shed and whipped me. And I felt every bit of it. Still happy with my overall performance and effort, but man, it it took a chunk out of me, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that chart we were looking at earlier, right? You said
Oh God.
in the 80s, what was it?
Yeah, it was 80s. Like if you you can read a bunch of different articles and papers or research on like the effects of dew point on your overall performance. But this chart was specifically like matched as the graph when it was like, matched the overall ambient, like just the temperature with the dew point. And I think it was like in the 80s with a dew point of like 75 was like, you need to look at over 100 seconds difference in your optimizing your overall pace. That's the kind of pace difference you're going to see when the weather.
100 seconds.
Yeah.
So that means I'm low sevens.
Oh, you're a low 7 guy for sure.
Low sevens.
I mean, that's something like that.
In reality, don't believe the numbers you see.
Yeah, don't. That's how it is. Like, and everybody's, like I felt it. Like, because the morning before I went out and ran, the humidity was low. There was no dew point. It was in the 60s. And I remember looking at my heart rate for the run. I did like the 2-mile run, and I was thinking like, oh, I think I'm gonna have a good day. Next, like not even 24 hours later, totally different environment. Like that's why you can't always compare race days, because it's 100% different. It's always 100% different. Like even like if that race had been a day before. Oh, it had been a huge difference in people's runs because it felt incredible. Friday and Saturday morning, it felt unbelievable outside. The humidity was low, the dew point level, it just felt awesome. Storms rolled in, totally different story. That's why you just can't take everything. You got everything with a grain of salt. Like you can't just compare apples to apples. Like even looking at my own age group, 3 years ago when I did it, I was 8th in my age group with a 4:39, I think, or 4:38. And I think I was 8th in my age group with 2 minutes faster than I did this year and 80-something overall. And then this year I did it. I was, I think, a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes slower, was 13th in my age group, but I placed higher overall against the field in the 60s out of like 2,000. So it's just like you just can't, which to me, always say like, always look like overall against the field. Besides the fact that like some of these age groups are just insanely stacked. That it's just that's why you can't compare races to races because everything is different. Even if you do the same exact course, the conditions are what make races easier or harder. That's why it's just so hard to judge. And you really honestly like you can pick at every race you do, and whether it's a PR or not a PR, listen, we all have things we want to work on, things we want to fix, things we want to address. I'm the same way. I spent the first 30 minutes thinking, all right, what can we do differently? I got a lot to work on. That's why it's kind of hard for me to be like really, really happy or really disappointed. And especially for me, like just being generally a long time since I've crossed a finish line. After Texas, been 3 years. I was just happy to get it done. And that's honestly all I thought about the last 2 miles. But just move faster so you can finish this, and just be done. And just honestly, just be done with it. Just get this pain over with. The slower you go, the more pain you're going to have to endure. Just rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with. And just check the box, dust the rust off, everybody call it. But it was, and listen, I think that's how every person should judge their races. Yes, performance and time matters. We're all shooting for a time, but or a place, to beat this or to beat that. But if you can say you put forth a lot of effort, then you should be happy. If you executed your plan, then you should be happy. If you genuinely thought you did the best you could do, given the day, given your training, then I think you'd be hard pressed to be really that disappointed if you're being a realist, right? If you're not living in that false training zone where, well, I wanted to do this training and I wanted to have this time, but what I didn't do is I didn't do enough training, so I didn't get that time, and I'm still disappointed. You shouldn't be disappointed about your race. You should be disappointed about the training that you put in, or you can just kind of say, which is kind of how I felt, like given the amount of training that I did leading up to this race versus the amount I've done in the past, like, I really don't have that much to complain about, because I trained a lot less than normal, but so, and it fit well into the life that I have with the amount of stress in other areas. And so generally speaking, like, I think I have to be, pretty okay with it.
I think that's the hardest thing for people to accept is really where they're at. And that's what you're saying is like, that's why looking at my run, you always want to do better, but man, I got to be okay with what happened out there, and I think a lot of us we talked about it, man. Our training, doesn't equal our race vision, our race fantasy a lot of times. And we end up getting out there on that run or whatever, and it kind of smashes us in the face. And it's like, hey, we got to realistically look at things. And that's why I'm a big proponent of aiming low instead of aiming high in these races, because I don't think it's impossible to have that race. I'm just saying the more pressure you put on yourself, or the more you try and you go hard, and it's tougher to hold on sometimes. But if you go out there and give your body a chance, and sometimes that can open up, and it can be like, whoa, this day kind of came out of nowhere, more so than always going out and try to manufacture it mentally before you even begin. And plus, if you did that race yesterday, 99.9% of the people in this country or this world probably couldn't have done that. So you got to feel pretty good about that.
More than that, probably.
Yeah.
It is. It's just one of those days where, especially the later I think you were out there, where it just got tougher and tougher and tougher. I think that's one thing, as much as athletes and people in general like to predict and like to control everything in life and to always know what's going to happen, you have no idea. And you just generally have no idea how you're going to feel, what the conditions are going to be like. Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cold? Is it going to be windy? Is it not going to be windy? Is it going to be humid? Is it not going to be humid? Like, how's your body going to respond? How is it, there's just so many. I mean, honestly, if that race happens and it's wetsuit legal and there's less humidity and dew point, you're probably looking at like 10 minutes off a lot of people's times. That's just not, or, it could have been perfect conditions, but it could have been, 20 mile an hour headwinds and crosswinds on the bike course. That's why you can always if and or but, every single race that you do. But, that's why, again, like comparing time after time after time, it's just so hard to do. Because the conditions and the person that's in the conditions is not the same, and I think that's just something that we all have to take into context and look for more ways to be, not to make excuses, but to look for ways to be real, just be realistic about not so much what you deserve, but more likely the area you should be in of what you earned with your training. Like I'm sure a lot of us could say, here's kind of what I thought for. I mean, listen, I thought for my race, I'd swim about a 32 to 34. I swam just under 32. I thought for my bike, I'd swim between a 224, or I'd bike between a 224 and a 228. I ended up biking like a 223. And for a run, I thought I might be, around the 220 or the 720s to 730s, and I ended up in like the high 730s. So I knew around what I was like, I think capable of, but if I'd have done like, what do I want for the day? Those would have been, 30, 31 swim, sub 220 bike and a low 7 run. But then if I took a realistic view of my training and what I knew I had done and what I thought could be, replicated on race day. And I was like, these are the numbers that I'm probably going to get today, which my total time, I was like, you're probably going to be like between a 4. Would I love to go under 440? Sure. Realistically, where I'm probably going to be 440 to 445, where I ended up 441. It's just like, I think you have to have a realistic view, not just this is what I hope to do, because that's when you get yourself into trouble. You start hoping and wishing and then going and putting in way more effort to match a time that you're not prepared for, and that's when you end up not even falling in the ballpark of reality, and you just kind of overshoot your day so much that you don't even end up falling in the category of being realistic. Then you just fall into the category of, I had a really bad day because I paced really poorly, so now I really have no idea what was realistic for today.
Yeah, and it adds so much more stress, I think, to have those high goals on everything, and it probably, I don't know, who knows, affects the way you feel going into it. But I don't know. And with me on that run, man, it was sort of a mystery run for me, because I wasn't sure. I had done some training that I thought might translate, and it may have. I had, like low 8s in my mind, or, something like that, potentially. But about halfway through, I was like, all right, just get under 2 hours. And that's where it went, and that, I think if I would have kept trying, if that would have been my only goal and I would have tried to stick to it, I think it would have been just easier to start walking or like screw it, it's out the door kind of thing, rather than, we've talked about it before, sort of this in-race adjustment to your goals, the different goals, or making realistic, mental changes during a race so you don't feel like the whole day is shot just because you didn't hit the one thing that you were trying to do. It's easier to, I think it just makes everything more pleasurable. And frankly, I think it's sort of like that thing about, all right, let's just hang in there and do what I can do rather than just quit or give up.
Yeah, just
and I think that's what we tend to do is like, my goals are shot. I'm just going to start walking, screw this sport.
It's just a
I'm
grimace.
out.
Yeah, it was just like,
why do I do this triathlon?
Right. I had a couple athletes send me like a picture of like a screenshot from the finish, like, oh, you're smiling. I was like, that's not a smile, that's a grimace. I was generally really uncomfortable and in a lot of pain when I finished. I just dug that deep, and that's what I was the most proud of for the day, is that I was able to get to a point to where I knew I was uncomfortable. It wasn't dangerous, but it was not a feeling I wanted to have, but I just sat with it, and I was like, this is just how it's going to be for an hour and 40 minutes. You just have to deal with it, and just sit there. And then the last 2 miles is like everything you got. Just run as hard, whatever you have left, just to get it over with. It should not feel good, right? It should be, if you're really trying to extract and squeeze every ounce of what you have left out of your body, it's not going to feel good. It is not going to feel pleasurable. It's going to feel just really not good at all. And I think that's just one thing. I know that isn't like a feather in the cap, or hey, you're not going to want to go sign up for a race right now, but that's just the truth. But I think that's also what, why we do it, the things we do, and why we sign up for races is it's not to make ourselves comfortable or to feel good or to make it be easy. It's because we know it's going to be hard, and to see what we can do when we really push ourselves and learn about it and then apply it for next time.
Okay. Well,
I'll tell you what, if you're on roads like this, I probably would have dropped another 5 minutes off the course. Freshly paved roads here, just outside of the city of Knoxville. That's all we have. That's our road trip, roadcast number 4 we've always done, or that we've ever done. Podcast 498. We got 500 coming up soon. I guess that's next week. We have our Chattanooga weekend training camp coming up starts on Thursday night. Looking forward to seeing all the athletes coming to town for that. But that's it. I hope you had an awesome weekend. You raced hard, you raced well, and you're happy with it. Have a good perspective on things. As always, if you want to figure out more about all the things that we do, you can follow us on Instagram, C26 Triathlon. You can always go to our website, which is C26triathlon.com, and is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. Up in there, click on the coaching tab to learn more about all the coaching packages that we offer, and also peruse through the staff of coaches that we have. If you have any questions for Mike specifically, you can reach out to him. He is at crushingiron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me specifically, I'm at C26coach@gmail.com.
Okay, buddy. I always enjoy the roadcast.
Yeah, me too. It's a good use of time.
Okay. I'll catch you later.
See you, dude. Bye.